So my name's Alice and I work for Bond, the International Development Network, and I'd like to talk about empathy versus sympathy and kind of does pity undermine people's long-term engagement with our issues, and if so, how can we change our communications and still motivate action? So I'd like to share some of our learning from the international development sector and a piece of research called the Narrative Project and kind of the insights that's given us. So where are we starting? There are, we know from across a lot of bits of different research that there are three big barriers to UK public support for international development. We know that people are really cynical about what's been achieved in development. They think that nothing's changed over the past few decades. We know that people feel distant and disconnected from people living in poorer parts of the world. And we know that people feel like their actions can't make a difference. So faced with that, we also kind of know, and this holds across a lot of different bits of research, not just the Narrative Project, we know that exposure to guilt-inducing messages and images of kind of starving children, flies in their eyes, is making people feel even more cynical and more distant from like our efforts to alleviate global poverty. So the Narrative Project really wanted to look at, well, actually, how can we change our language and our communications to build more support for the issues, to communicate differently about development and aid. And there are two really interesting things that the Narrative Project kind of taught me personally, but also kind of I'm reaching out to the sector to speak about. And one is around audiences and the other one is around language and framing. So audiences, it gave us some really interesting insight into our audience in that a third of the UK public are engaged with the issues. Now, engaged doesn't necessarily mean supportive. Engaged means they have knowledge, they pay attention to media coverage, and they think that the issues are somewhat important. But I repeat, not necessarily supportive. And there's a breakdown of how that 32%, that third, comes out. And that is supporters. I'm not going to say too much about them. I think we all know what supporters means. Skeptics, quite a small wedge, quite a small sliver of that sort of 12% of that 32%. They're very sceptical about development. They really drive that negative narrative on waste and corruption around aid. They're very economically rather than emotionally driven, but they do know an awful lot. And then the swings, which I think is really the most interesting segment of this audience breakdown. They really question what's being achieved in development. They can really be driven into that negative narrative by the skeptics. They'd quite like to take action on the issues. They think it's important, but they feel really overwhelmed and quite unsure about how they can help. So this really presents us with a bit of an opportunity, because within that engaged public, there is quite a big chunk of that audience, that swing audience, who, if we can reach in the right way and be persuaded to kind of feel more positive and more hopeful about what we're doing in development, we can potentially double our supporter base, and that's quite exciting, really. So how can we do this? How can we reach those swings? How can we embolden our supporters? And how can we neutralise those skeptics and just keep them quiet, really? And the Narrative Project, the second piece of information, is around the framing. So independence. Instead of talking about global poverty and like ending global poverty, people see that as far too abstract and they can't really connect with it. The Narrative Project tells us to lead with stories of independence. So development programs are helping people in the world's poorest places stand on their own 2 feet, become self-reliant, become independent. We need to be talking more about partnership, like how we share knowledge and resources and information. And it's not just a one-way street, it's like how we're listening to people that we're working with. We often work in the development sector in partnership, but we're not, are we talking about it enough, would be my question. Shared values, can we show how this is about people achieving their full potential? This is about reframing that need and focusing on wasted potential rather than helpless suffering. How can we build that human connection between people in this country and people in other countries? And then how can we talk about progress through those frames? If anyone wants more information, please come and chat to me, or please look on the Bond website for more information about the Narrative Project. So finally, I just wanted to put together 3 things that I thought were relevant from the Narrative Project that could apply across sectors. So firstly, people we know selectively choose which facts to use and which facts to discard based on their values. But so often we use language, we lead with a fact on something rather than using language which taps into people's existing beliefs and existing values. And actually, I would quite like to challenge that and say, let's stop leading with those facts, let's stop trying to give people all this factual information and let's go straight to their values and straight to their beliefs. Empathy versus sympathy, language which invokes hope, not pity, can still motivate action, but it doesn't undermine that long-term support for issues. So how can we use some more of that hopeful language? And reframing need. We don't have to talk about helpless suffering. We can still talk about the need, but we can reframe it in a way that is around wasted potential rather than suffering, and not kind of deepen those feelings of hopelessness. So yeah, just wanted to leave you with those three things. Please come and chat to me if you find any of this interesting. Thanks.